Thursdays are our How Chords Move days. If you're my age, nearing 40, 37, 38, 40, statistically speaking, you probably have under 2,000 more Thursdays to go. So let's make this one count. I am a big advocate, if you know me, you know this about me, I'm a big advocate of going for the low-hanging fruit. I am not that concerned with spending 20 years chasing after some kind of crazy advanced concept so that I have one new trick. I want to take the simple things, the low-hanging fruit that's just right here, that has tons of juice and tons of meat in it, and I just want to grab it and take it and steal it and start getting creative with how I use it. Okay? Let it seep in that you, if you're my age, you have probably under 2,000 more Thursdays to go. That's not that many. Right? What would you do if you only had $2,000 in your bank account? Like, you're not going to go spend 20 years building a career. You're going to go find a job that will pay you something today. So today what I want to do is I want to take a very simple harmony with some really simple voicings. I want to talk about how we can make something really pretty with it. For solo guitar, for comping, for all that kind of stuff. Gary, same here. I'm not sure what you're same hearing, but I'm always a fan of agreement. Although I don't shy away from a nice argument from time to time. We're going to talk about diminished chords today, and specifically what I want to discuss is how we can get away from this, without necessarily intending to insult anyone, how we can get away from this sort of boring, very parallel sound. Is it a neat trick to know? Yes, and I have used it, and I'm sure it will come back up in my playing here and there at some point, but it's just so parallel. Right, if you can't take this drop 2 shape, which if you know me, you know my feelings on drop chords, if you can't take this drop 2 shape and move it up or down in minor thirds, 3 frets at a time, it's worth toying with it for a few minutes and you might get a little bit of value out of it, but it's very surface level, right? This is like the perfect example of what I'm always talking about, that we're always trying to add more information as far as width. We're always trying to get wider to memorize more things, but we rarely take the time to go deep. I'm much more a fan of taking one stupid, simple idea and going deep and seeing how much I can create with it versus memorizing tens of thousands of ideas. So rather than worrying about the drop 2 thing, okay, these very common shapes for diminished, and getting them moving in minor thirds, what I want to do today is I want to simplify the voicing down to a shell voicing, a 3-note voicing. There's only going to be 2 of them that we're going to look at, and then I want to show you a cool little trick for how we can create both oblique movement and contrary movement, right? This is all parallel movement, meaning it's all moving the same direction, it's all moving in the same intervals, everything is the exact same. It's just like an army in marching formation. Pretty boring sounding to the ear. It's not overly exciting. Versus oblique movement, which is where if we have, let's say, 3 voices, maybe the middle voice stays put and the other 2 voices move. That's oblique movement. Doesn't have to be the middle voice. Could be the bottom, could be the top. Oblique movement is when we have sort of like a pedal tone. One note stays put and the other notes move. Okay, this is a much more intriguing sound to the ear, even if it's an unconscious thing that, you know, a non-jazz listener is not going to notice they're hearing it. It's just going to come across as prettier, more colorful. So what we're going to do today, we're going to create some oblique movement, and we're going to also create some contrary movement, which is where the voices move against each other, right? So maybe one voice moves up, one voice moves down, and one voice stays put. That's a much more 3-dimensional way to express diminished movement. And then we're going to make sure that we're practicing this in the context of moving harmony. So we're also going to resolve to different chords. So we're going to have a diminished chord. We're going to use this little trick I'm going to show you today to create that oblique and contrary motion, and then we're going to resolve it to another chord. Okay? So here are the two shapes. You can grab the PDF using the link in the description. Here are the two shapes. It's basically exactly this drop 2 shape that I started off with that I said we were going to kind of avoid, but without the pinky. So this is the first shape. It's just the bottom 3 voices of it. Okay, if you play it as a C diminished, it's 3rd fret C, 3rd fret, 4th fret, 2nd fret. Root, diminished 5th, flat 5th, diminished 7th. So there's no 3rd here, but it's pretty strongly being implied. Okay. And then the other version of this, if we keep it as, this is like a root 5 shell voicing, meaning the C root note is on the 5th string. The other version we're going to look at today is the root 6 version. If we wanted to play it as C, it would be up here on the 8th fret 6th string. And here I'm ignoring the 5th string, so we have root, nothing on the 5th string, 7, 8. 8, nothing, 7, 8. Okay, this is root, diminished 7, 3rd, minor 3rd. So there's no 5th in this shape. Okay. These are the only 2 shapes we're going to talk about or worry about today. This is a legitimate shell voicing, root 3rd, 7th, no 5th. And this one's kind of a variation on it. There's no 3rd in this one. I'm using root 5th, 7th, which I still think of it as a shell voicing. Okay, so here's the trick. First of all, we're going to lower this down a half step because I want to resolve to like a C major or C minor chord. So we're going to play this as a B diminished, not a C diminished. If you look at the PDF, I have it written out. You'll see at the top, it says, what does it say? B, D, F, and A flat diminished. All the shapes we're going to look at today work for all 4 of those diminished chords because diminished is a symmetrical harmony. So we're not really worried about what the actual root note of the chord is. We can use this for any 4 of those. Okay. So if we take this C shape and move it down a half step, we have, technically speaking, we have B diminished, but really this could be B, D, F, or A flat. Okay. But right now we have the B root note happening in the low voice, so we'll call it B. Instead of moving up in a minor 3rd, right? Instead of doing that, what I want to do is look at the root note, the B note, and I want you to drop the B note down a minor 3rd. Okay? If you're already into your intermediate stages or advanced stages or professional stages of playing, you can probably spot that really quickly. If you're still kind of a beginner, I don't know how you're hanging with me this far into this conversation if you are, but if you somehow are interested in what I'm saying as a beginner and can understand what I'm talking about, because I leave a lot of the basic theory stuff out, just move up 2 frets and drop down to the 6th string. That's the movement down a minor 3rd. That's the geometry of it on the fretboard. So B down to A flat. 2nd fret 5th string, 4th fret 6th string. And turn it into the root 6 voicing. So we could call this B diminished to A flat diminished. They're the same chord. They're really, this is just moving, it's almost like moving an inversion, right? Because they all contain the same pitches. Yes, we are leaving one pitch out, but that pitch is being implied. Our ear is sort of recognizing it without us actually playing it. Okay, now this seems very simplistic, but check out what happens here. I'm going to point out some inner voice movements, not really inner voice movements, some of the movement types that are at work here, and then we're going to talk about how we can create some resolutions. So let's look at the top voice. It's moving up. Right? See if you can accentuate the top voice the way I am here. Okay, you can even connect them chromatically. See if you can accentuate the middle voice, the voice second down from the top, the 3rd fret F note. Check out what's happening with this F note. Okay, here's our oblique movement. It's not going anywhere. These are the top two voices together. The F note's staying put, and the A flat note is moving up to B. Can you hear it? Can you see it? If you wanted to get really fancy, since there is no movement on that F note, we could leave it, maybe drop down to the leading tone, just to create some kind of inner voice movement. We don't have to, but you see how we can take this very simple idea of a shell voicing, and we can start, this is the low-hanging fruit I'm talking about, we can start getting in and tweaking it, right? I would rather spend an hour exploring how to create something interesting with something this simple that I can immediately apply to a 2-5-1 or a standard, versus spending years and years chasing after something really advanced, because this is going to create the impression of something advanced without my brain having to go to something advanced. Okay, the bottom voice is going down. B down to A flat. Okay. So we can walk the top voice up if we want. We can wiggle around the middle voice using that leading tone. We could theoretically chromatically walk down the bottom voice. I'm not super worried about this one, but it is possible. Okay. The most important thing I want you to take away from this is just this movement. You hear how like two-dimensional this movement sounds now? It's all parallel versus... Okay, now check out what happens once we're here. If you just read straight through the PDF, the voicings on the PDF, the next shape, again, look at the root note. The root note's gonna hop up a tritone. Daniel, what's happening, man? Good to see you on here. Okay, if you hop up a tritone and go back to root 5, we now have D diminished. Okay, and then we can just continue this movement of down a minor third, up a tritone, down a minor third, up a tritone, down a minor third, up a tritone. Down a minor third, up a tritone, down a minor third, up a tritone, down a minor third, up a tritone, down a minor third. Okay. Versus the top voice is the same. Can you hear it? Right? So we can, if we're trying to do like some kind of chord melody, or if you're trying to play some sort of melodic idea in the top voice of your voicings, you can still pull it off with this, but again, now we have oblique movement, we have contrary movement, we have all this more interesting sounds, all these more interesting sounds breaking up that very parallel, kind of boring, drab. I do this so rarely, it's like throwing me off trying to play it straight now, because it just bores me. Now we need to be able to resolve this, right? So let's do the simplest resolution. There's a handful of different ways in our Chords for Life course. We talk about 3 different directions the diminished chord can resolve. We're just going to focus on the most obvious and easiest one, the one that we mainly learned first, which is the sort of diminished dominant relationship. So if we're thinking B diminished, this is related to the G7 flat 9. Okay, it's sort of an inversion of it, like a rootless inversion. So both B diminished and G7 want to resolve to C major. Okay, I call this just resolving up the half step. That's one of the directions diminished can resolve. Okay, it can resolve to any type of C major or C minor chord. So we can do C major 7, we can do C6, we can get fancy and do C add 2. Okay, if you want something a little less traditional sounding, you can just do a straight up basic C major, C minor 6. Okay, anything that's C that gives us that half step works. So how much time we got left? We're nearing the end. So we can, at any moment during what I wrote out in the PDF, at any moment along this pathway, we can resolve to C, to any version of it that we want that's nearby. Ideally, we want to voice lead it. But as long as it's like, it almost doesn't matter if it's an inversion, if it's a shell voicing, it almost doesn't really matter as long as we resolve. So I would practice playing this shape and then resolving to some type of C major or C minor. Okay, once you can do that, then try doing 2 diminished chords and resolve that to C major. This is an open C major triad. Okay. Notice the contrary motion in this resolution. The 2 bottom voices drop down and the top voice goes up. Instead. Ooh, there's a C minor 6 instead. Okay. Let's go 3 diminished voicings and try and resolve. Sean, I don't know if you're on here, but this is one of our shell voicing inversions. If you guys didn't see our shell voicing, major 7 shell voicing inversions lesson 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I forget when we did it now, it was a while back. This was one of the shapes, 3rd major 7 root, little 3-note voicings. Okay, we can add the C note underneath it if we want. Let's do 4 movements, 4 voicings through diminished. Right? Beautiful resolution to the root 6 shell voicing. Okay. Versus just so you hear how parallel it is now. Okay, we can mess around with this C major. It doesn't have to be a shell voicing that we resolve to. Here's a major 7, sharp 9. Root 3rd, major 7, sharp 9. If you're in the Melodic Triad study group and hang with me and have checked out the tonality vault, you might notice 2 notes from the B major triad, and then a C major 7 shell voicing underneath it, right? There's our little pianistic voicing. This is a miniature version of our fully extended voicing. B major triad over C major 7. So the fully extended version would give us the sharp 9 and the sharp 11, but in this mini version, we just have the sharp 9. Okay? Super hip sound. I wish the sharp 9 got used more for major 7 chords. Let's keep going. C major 7. Right, we can resolve up or down. Coming from the what looks like F diminished, we can come up to this inversion of the C shell voicing where it's 5th, 3rd, 7th, or excuse me, 5th, 7th, 3rd. Or we can resolve back down to the other inversion, 3rd, 7th root. They're both right there. By chord just above and just below it. That's the beauty of diminished. If you think about Western, the Western tuning system, the Western tonal workings of having 12 notes, fully diminished 7 is made of 4 notes, right? 1, minor 3, diminished 5, flat 5, diminished 7. And each of these are spread out perfectly evenly across the 12 notes of Western tonal music, which is why every 3 frets we have a new note, because it breaks down the entire system into 4 perfectly even zones, right? Which means that no matter where you want to resolve to, it's right next to it, because everything is broken up completely evenly across the entire spectrum. So there's always going to be a voicing right above it or right below it. You might not be able to see it yet. You might have to do some work to spot your shell voicings and your melodic triad, fully extended voicings, but there's always a nearby place to resolve to. Okay, you can just run around however you want inside this diminished flow, and there will be a place to resolve. You just have to spend some time looking for it and practicing it. Based on the lowest note in the voicing, but this is all B, D, F, and A flat diminished, each shape is. But I'm going to call this one A flat because I'm playing the A flat in the lowest voice. Right, A flat diminished down to an inversion of C shell voicing. We're putting the 5th in the low voice instead of the root. Or if you want to resolve up, you could actually think of this as like a C6, and you could play what effectively will look like an A minor chord. But if you put A minor over a C note, it's really just C major, right? C6. So we can resolve down or up. Okay, this is just an open C major triad. F diminished down, C major triad. If you want it to be, if you want to have that sort of very heart-wrenching major 7 lovey-dovey quality to it, just take the C major triad, find the C note, which is in the middle, and move it down a half step, and there's your rootless C major 7. If you hang with me, you might recognize that this is an open E minor triad now, which is our melodic triad for C major 7. here's C major 7, here's C6, here's C minor 6 over G. Woo! Yeah. That's a nice way to end a minor tune right there. Certainly much more interesting than... Does that work? It works. It's just so parallel. There's nothing wrong with doing it. I'm just trying to show you how we can take something very simple like these two shell voicings and squeeze a lot of very advanced sounding ideas out of it, just by digging straight down into the ground rather than trying to memorize lots of new things. The last one, if we go one more voicing, we go from F up to B diminished, and now we're back at the octave of where we started, so all the inversions and resolutions that we talked about down here apply up here. Right, there's resolution to C minor 6, to C6, to C major 7, to C sus 2. Okay, lots of potential here. Take your time, go slow. Start off just by making sure you can see the movement of C diminished. Sorry, B diminished. Right, just practice it. Think of it almost like a chord scale. Move up the fretboard and down the fretboard, but it's a chord scale that has oblique and contrary motion built inside of it. And we're effectively, it's not really a chord scale. We're just playing inversions of the diminished chord, but we're adding in all these quirky individual voice movements that are going against each other. Mess around with that. Mess around with adding in those chromatic movements and those leading tones to create the sensation of actual inner voice movement. And then at any point along the way, ascending or descending, practice resolving to C major or C minor. It can resolve to just about any chord we want it to, right? Because again, it's these diminished shapes are spread evenly throughout the entire 12-note system we're playing within. So they can resolve, any one of them can resolve up or down a half step or whole step, and we can basically find our way to whatever chord we want. But this resolution up a half step is sort of the most natural and most obvious and used version, because it kind of relates to the quality of dominant tonic. Any of this stuff, if you look at a real book and you see G7 C major 7 or G7 C minor 7, you can put all of this over the G7 and then resolve to the C, because this is all related functionally and in terms of pitch to G dominant. These are just like rootless G dominant flat nines. G7 flat 9 with no G note. Okay? Let's see if you guys had any questions or comments that I missed. It always shows more comments than it will actually show me. It says there's 6, but I'm only seeing 4. Miles, happy to hear it, man. I love it too. Michael, what's up? If these resolve to some kind of C, then could they also resolve to some kind of A, E flat, G flat? Yeah, so even, as I said a minute ago, we don't have to always resolve up a half step. We can resolve to a variety of different directions, but even, this is a good call, even just resolving up a half step, we don't only have C available to us, because this is not only B diminished. As you're pointing out, this is B diminished, D diminished, F, and A flat. So we can resolve up a half step from any of those, which means this exact movement, without transposing it to any other keys, can resolve to C major, E flat major, G flat major, and A major. This is an open E flat triad. Okay. If you have the sound of the C major stuck in your head, it means, and this sounds weird, it's because I've been spending the last 20 or 30 minutes playing this as a B diminished sound, always resolving to C, but with a little bit of tinkering with it, you can learn to hear it in this new key. If I played right now, it sounds perfectly in because I just set up your ear to hear in the key of E flat by just playing like a little 1, 6, 2, 5. So yeah, totally. You can use this in all 4 of those keys. That's kind of the beauty of diminished, is that there's really only a few of them to know, because this whole run works for all 4 keys. So if you do that in 3 different, like if you do it where I showed you and then move it down a half step and then move it up a whole step, those 3 versions of it will cover all 12 major and minor keys. All 24 major and minor keys. Yeah. Carl, you're welcome, man. Glad to hear it. Gary, interesting that minor 6 and diminished are often the same shape. Yeah, they are. The big difference is the 5th. That's really the only thing that changes as far as these shell voicings go. So if we're playing C diminished on root 6, there is no 5th, so it's the same shell voicing for diminished and for C minor 6. This version down here, and it's one of the reasons I like this root 5 shape I showed you, where the flat 5th is present, is not C minor 6 because the 5th is flat. Right? If you turn it into the C minor 6 shape, your ear is probably going to interpret this as C diminished because now there's no 5th. Actually, my ear is hearing this as C minor 6. It feels very stable, very tonic and resolved. Okay, so you could play, right, that's B diminished, C minor 6. So it all depends. If the 5th is present, then they're not going to look the same. If the 5th is absent, then they will look the same, because it's the only note that's different. Daniel, happy to hear it, man. If you guys have any more questions, leave them in the comments. Grab the PDF. If you're not part of our study group and you're digging this kind of stuff, we have all kinds of courses that kind of break down a lot of these ideas into simpler, practical, step-by-step things that you can actually work on, depending on where you are. I try and find a way to teach so that not necessarily day one beginners, but that early stage jazz players, intermediate and advanced and professionals can all kind of get something out of it, because it's just about memorizing the fundamentals. And then rather than leaving the fundamentals and doing more interesting things, learning more interesting, complicated topics, we just stick with the fundamentals and just run with them. We just dig down and learn ways to apply them melodically and harmonically. We have, tomorrow is our Advanced Melodic Triad Concepts Day, and then this weekend, I believe, study group members, we're back on for our open office hours. We did not have one last weekend, so if you've been left with any big questions, just come and hang this weekend, and I will give the best answers I can. Thank you guys for hanging today. Happy practicing. Hey YouTube, it's Jordan Clemens with NYC Jazz Guitar Master Classes and the Melodic Triad Study Group. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I have a ton of content coming out on YouTube this year. We've been doing daily jazz guitar lessons, so I'm going to be posting videos like this pretty much every day. So if you dug this and you want to follow me, subscribe and make sure that you turn on notifications so that you can watch more videos like this. Thanks again for watching. Hope to see you in the comment section. Hope to see you in the next video.